Welcome to you online as well. We are in the holy presence of God, and we need to remember that. And that is our theme today as we follow the Lasallian Way. And it's appropriate that we are gathered in the chapel, and the Blessed Sacrament is right here with us. And I'm grateful to Sister Phyllis for convincing me that we shouldn't have to do anything extra with Jesus, because Jesus would like to be with us in the same way that we want to be with him. And so we should remember, in fact, that we are in the holy presence of the Eucharist. And so we gather for our second episode of the Lasallian Way, our fall enrichment series here at St. Charles. As you know, I'm Leif Kerwald, pastoral coordinator, and so pleased to welcome you as we explore the faith, the spirituality, the wisdom of St. John Baptist de La Salle, the Christian Brothers, and the education movement around the world that was begun centuries ago. In another lifetime for me, 20 or so years ago, I worked as an editor at St. Mary's Press, which is a Lasallian ministry of the Christian Brothers in the Midwest, in Winona, Minnesota. Now, I never lived in Winona, and I'm really glad for that. I commuted to Winona about 4 or 5 times a year and was an offsite editor. But I learned some things about the Lasallian Way, and I learned that there are expressions that people make who are embedded, if you will, in Lasallian ministry. And one of those is, we would often say to each other when we would gather, let us remember that we are in the holy presence of God. And so that's what we're going to break open today. And I'm pleased to have Oscar Leong, president of De La Salle, with us. Oscar, thanks so much for being here. Oscar and I have known each other for about 3 years, and we've had quite a journey together in navigating the complex waters of welcoming De La Salle to our campus and entering into partnership. But we're so pleased. We're so pleased that you're here. And so, Oscar, welcome. And I invite you to just introduce yourself, give us a little bit of your background.
So thank you again, Leif, and then folks from St. Charles. Proud to be here. But I will say this though, Leif, how dare you say anything bad about Winona, Minnesota? I spent 2 glorious summers in Winona, Minnesota at St. Mary's University.
Okay.
And so actually it was pretty nice.
And that's where the publisher is right there on the campus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think being invited today is an honor. Honor in so many different ways to talk about De La Salle and what he means to the school and what it means to have the faith in the presence of God. But the reality, Leif, I think you and I talked about this, the partnership between St. Charles and De La Salle Catholic was truly divine intervention. God has played a role, and God had been present in our conversations from the moment we got together. And I truly believe that. I feel it when I come to see you folks. I will apologize now. I'm not as present at Matt's as I should be, but God knows that. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, that core principle is what drives a lot of us Lasallians and what we do in education. Give you a little bit of background. So I was born in Tijuana, Mexico. I'm biracial. Mother is Mexicana, father is Chinese. So imagine growing up, Mexican mom who's very Catholic, Chinese father who's Buddhist. Okay. And my father said, you will go to mass because your mother wants you to be Catholic. But when you and I talk, I will show you the Buddhist way for conversation. So I was a little confused to be as a young person, you know. But over time, I learned to really embrace and understand both sides. And I tell you that because upon my arrival at Cathedral High School, which is the Christian Brothers High School in Los Angeles, I was introduced to the Christian Brothers in the Lasallian Way. And really, that's where I think I found my spirit, where I found the zeal with God, right? And the Lasallian mission to me means a lot because when I think back at my own life as a young person, I tell everyone very honestly, the Christian Brothers saved my life. Only because of where I grew up, the situation, different time, different era. And I think the way the brothers treated us as young men, again, now as an adult looking back on how they treated us, it was those core principles of humanity. And one being trying to instill in all of us, all these crazy young boys in Los Angeles, right? How to live and accept God in their life. A lot of us, I think at that time, were just not concerned with God. But over time, we learned to become a Christian Brothers boy. And we say that all the time, like, I'm a Christian Brothers boy. And what does that mean, right? And I say that sometimes to Jesuits, hey, I'm a Christian Brothers boy, you're a Jesuit. But in all good fun.
Okay, Jerry, you heard that.
Right? But I think those core principles that the brothers lived by, and then eventually, handed over to the lay, were super important. And I'm not sure if you know the history of that piece, but
Go ahead.
In the late 80s, early 90s, when the brothers understood that there'll be a time where there may not be a brother, right? Because over time, the number of brothers worldwide has dwindled. So to give you an example, and this number could be wrong, but this is what I remember from high school. I was told back in 1984, I was a junior in high school, and I actually attended a group meeting where boys my age were considering becoming a brother. I actually attended this meeting. I was thrown out really quickly. They said, Oscar, you're not brother material. I said, oh, okay. But I had the lunch. And so, but while I was there, they were talking about the brothers and different things. And they mentioned that in the world at the time, there were 5,000 Christian brothers. This is 1984. And you fast forward to now, that number is way below 500 worldwide of Christian brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they really had this vision in the late 80s, early 90s that, okay, we know what we do. De La Salle, our founder, patron saint of teachers, but we have to make sure the legacy continues through the partnership of lay. And so we, the lay teachers, now have become an extension of the Christian brothers. So the understanding that we're in the holy presence of God really means a lot to us as the lay teachers, because we understand that without God in us, with us, walking with us, we cannot do the work of the Christian brothers. Because ultimately, that's what we are here to do, is to do the work of the Christian brothers. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a really important piece and a powerful piece that a lot of us who are lay teachers or lay faculty and staff embrace, sometimes vocally, but also sometimes just spiritually or in solidarity, understanding that all that we do is the faith in Him, right? So that's a long answer and a long introduction, but
it's a great answer, because what I hear you saying is that when you hear the phrase, let us remember we are in the holy presence of God, what I heard you describe is that the Christian brothers who have influenced you have done so over a long period of time, not necessarily with the sense of, I'm gonna put religion into you, but just their presence and their modeling and their living provided a way.
I think so. I think the reality is that the Christian brothers really tried to be mentors to a lot of us, young folks, especially at an all-boys high school. At an all-boys high school in Los Angeles, I mean, they really had to be friend, mentor, educator, but also keeping the boys straight, right? But I think over time, we realized as graduates of a Christian Brothers High School that the things they were telling us, they were trying to really instill the power of God in all of us. It doesn't work for everybody. Everyone finds their way at different times in life. But for me personally, because of my situation at home, loving family, being introduced to the Guadalupanas in downtown LA, but also understanding my father's side of the Buddhist way of thinking, the Zen part makes total sense to me. And when you have the Zen part, having that faith that God is present when you walk, when you talk, and when you do. And I'll be honest with you, as much, and I've been here 3 years. Without God, I don't make it here for 3 years. Because there was so much going on, right? As far as the school, the partnership, COVID, and I think that's what really has got us through it. I think for Leaf and I, our conversations, I don't want to expose us too much, Leaf, but when I first sat down with Leaf, and I said, you know what, let's not talk business. Let's not talk shop. I wanted to learn more about him. At the end of the day, our partnership is really relational. And I think he needed to know more about me. Am I coming in just with, some side angle, right? I'm not sure what he thought of me. But it's important for us to understand each other. And I really do think that our faith allowed us to really align, right?
Oh, no question.
Yeah. I think over time, we found that to be so true, right?
Yeah.
So all those things mean the world to me. And I'm hopeful that now that we're here with St. Charles, that more of our students can find their way into your sanctuary. Because the reality is that, our school, I think, is a wonderful school and our kids are awesome. But not every child is exposed to God back home. So it's our responsibility to at least show them the way, talk about the way. And the more they hear it, you never know. Eventually, they may become a Christian brother. And we have had a De La Salle student become a Jesuit priest. I won't hold it against them, But that's the beautiful thing, right? And so I think at the end of the day, if we can just instill that goodness in young people so they become good people, great leaders. Right now in this climate in this country, we need good people. So the more we can address that and talk about that, and hopefully, by the time they go through our program after 4 years, they leave us, go to college, and become just phenomenal people and become the leaders of our city and our country. And that's why God has a role in this. I mean, sure, that presence is super important. So
you're absolutely right. At the heart of this relationship between school and parish is relationship. And it really did start with you and me, talking about things that had nothing to do with the business at hand.
Right.
If it was just the business at hand, it would be a landlord-tenant relationship.
Right.
And yet we all know that it's much more important and much more richer than that in terms of a relationship that's rooted in friendship, that's rooted in faith, and rooted in mission. And one of the things that we discovered early on is the compatibility of vision and mission. And that's why we're exploring the Lasallian Way, because so many of us don't know that, but we know that there's a richness there and we want to uncover it. So my question for you is, first of all, what is a president of a school, and how do you as president sort of lead the way toward that relationship and faith?
So if you go back 20 or 30 years, school presidents really didn't exist at parochial schools. You had headmasters at boarding schools or private schools. But what happened in the early 90s, there was a situation where a lot of Catholic schools were having to decide whether to go belly up or to, how do we survive, right? At least that's what the movement started with the president's side. So they had to figure out how to go from, and part of it because I think the lack of religious folks on campus. So for example, when I think back at Cathedral High School where I went to in Los Angeles, when I was a student there, in 4 years, every year we had between 14, maybe 16 Christian brothers that were teachers on campus. So when you do the math quickly, the Christian brothers that were there didn't get a traditional salary. They got their monthly stipend, right?
Right.
And each brother had their own way of enjoying that stipend, you know, the movies or whatever. But once the brothers started to dwindle, the reality is that in order to replace that brother, you have to find a layperson that pay him a proper salary. So that changed the whole dynamic of finances for schools. And so when that changed dramatically, the school had to figure out, okay, how are we going to maintain ourselves? Because in the past, you know, well, we had brother so-and-so and brother so-and-so, and they could take less this month. And well, now you can't ask, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Jones to take less because they have their own families to feed, right? So it went into the president model, which meant that the president is the superintendent or has governance over the school and has to maintain pretty much two things. Maintain that the mission stays true and it stays financially afloat. So that's really my two things, making sure that those two things happen. Now, for Christian Brothers schools, the president has to be Catholic. At other institutions, that's not true. But for brothers, any president, whether it's in, you know, Oregon or California, anywhere across the country, that person must be Catholic. And so in my role, I think, I actually think it's more than just mission and more than just money. I think it's also, the way I view my role is being amongst the kids. So I love being amongst the kids. So you'll see me at every sporting event, at a dance, gathering. I believe that because I am an extension of the brothers and that of God, I need to make myself present. It's a little different way of thinking about a president, but that's just the way I think of myself. And I think schools right now, because they have to figure themselves financially, the role of president becomes even more important. Ultimately, I let the principal do the day-to-day, the curriculum. But I do have a voice in that. I want to make sure that the curriculum or what we do day-to-day does represent the Christian brothers. And it does represent what our young people need once they leave our nest, right? And so I'm not sure I've answered the whole question.
No, that's great. What's going through my mind is I can imagine there are points of tension perhaps between that, maintaining that focus on the mission and yet having to, I mean, you had to raise tens of millions of dollars for this project. And, you know, that's a realm that I don't know anything about. What was that like?
It's something that, well, in the context of this school, it's a little bit different. So I will say this, a miracle has happened in North Portland. That miracle is what we did, St. Charles and De La Salle, coming together and what you see next door. I am not that good. I value myself, I trust myself, I think I work really hard. I love what I do, but God played a role. There is no way, and I would not want anyone else to go through what we had to go through in such a short period of time. Generally speaking, if you're not familiar with capital campaigns, how they work, generally you have a 2 or 3 year what's called ramp up, where you're planning, and you have a list of donors you think you can go out and meet with, and then you kick it off, and you have 3 or 4 years before you actually break ground. In our situation, I had to do it all within 3 years, but that was out of necessity because we knew that we had an expiration date, right? So getting back to your question, I think the tough part was making sure that we stayed the path without selling our soul. And the reason why I say that is because if we, for example, if we did not find you, or you didn't find us, right? And by the way, I've heard through our conversations that St. Charles came to us many years before, which was a shocker to me, but anyway, it happened, right? But if we did not find each other, I had to figure out where we're going to go. And that's an important piece because not every place is a place for holy ground for a school like ours. We couldn't sell our soul and say, let's just move next to this place. No, it had to be the right place. But people said, well, but you have an expiration date, so you have limited choices. Yes, but that's when you have to make sure that you stay the path and you stay with the mission, you stay with understanding that God will provide. And it did. Thankfully, it did. But it was a very complex time. I don't wish it on my worst enemy because it's very stressful. You know, I arrived as a 21-year-old and I woke up as a 54-year-old. So, yeah, and so very unique time, but again, beyond blessed of what transpired. And also what was pretty cool is the number of St. Charles grads that got excited about us being here. That was really exciting. And also the excitement of getting new donors to believe in a project where they have no skin in the game, right? They don't even, for example, we have a very, very beautiful person who I won't say his name, but he and his wife live in Coos Bay. They supported our campaign.
That's great.
That person's in Coos Bay.
That's extraordinary.
Why would they care about a North Portland school? But I think those are things that God has provided, right? God provided that conversation. Now, he pretty much said, Oscar, I gave you the conversation, now you got to do with it. And I think that's where I was just honest and just transparent. I need your help. But why? Who do you serve? We serve this community. This is why it's important. And I think that's where God played the role.
So the mission itself is, in effect, raised the dollars.
It has, but no. The mission has not always worked or raised the dollars across the country. Yeah. But I think at times, you know, if you have enough faith and zeal to do something, the mission will help you with that. But you have to present it in a way where it's simply not, and now this is now the president part, it's simply not just transactional. It's not about, you know, I'll shake your hand, you give me a check. It can't be like that. It has to be really a conversation about what the school would benefit and why you as a donor would benefit assisting our school. And it's a win-win, right? I think it gets lost when it becomes really transactional.
Sure. We're short on time, but I invite a question, a comment, either from those of you here or anyone online. Sandy.
If we had not entered into this with you guys and had this happen, would the North Catholic cease to exist?
No.
You would have found someone.
I think the reality based on, okay, hindsight is 2020, right? When I go back to July, I arrived July of 2018. Knowing what we had to go through in the timeline, we just didn't have enough time if we had to pivot and go to a different location. There was just too much that the school had to undergo for it to happen. So the reality is, I tell people honestly, I had to face the honest conversation about my school possibly closing. And it happened 3 times. My original time when I first got here, I said, okay, sitting down with the board of trustees and also with the Christian brothers and say, okay, what are my options? He said, well, you're very limited, Oscar, your options. Oh, okay. So if I don't have an option, that means that I will close in 3 years. Yes, that's true. So I knew that from the get-go, right? And over time, a couple of things happened internally that forced us once again to think about that. And then COVID. COVID was an honest time where we had to figure out, can our beautiful school exist? Because our school existed on work partners. So I think, I'm not sure if you knew this or not, but we're Christian brothers, but also associated with called Cristo Rey. And Cristo Rey is really the work component of our school. So across the country, there are 36 schools like De La Salle, but we're the only one in Oregon and Washington, so that's us. But the rest of us as presidents, once COVID happened, we started to meet every 2 weeks because everyone understood this major moment in time was going to affect our schools. If the kids can't go to work, the companies then actually won't pay. If they can't pay, we don't make payroll. If we don't make payroll, we don't exist, right? So that's an honest answer. Thinking back, I can say it honestly and say, okay, we got through that patch, or those patches. But I think that's why I go back to it. A major miracle has happened here in North Portland, and I want people to really understand and embrace it, because I have, and God has played a role in that. So.
Are there,
Cindy, I just wonder, we're really at the end of our time, and I just wonder.
I can stay as long as you want, by the way. So.
Well, but I promise, and
I was just gonna say that I think the partnership here with St. Charles in the 40-some years I've been coming here, the crisis we face, that this is a parish that's really blessed by the Holy Spirit. And it puts us through times, but it always comes through with something unexpected and even better than what was before. And I just think it's an exciting development that's going to be really great to watch it in the the future coming through. But yeah, like all the things, COVID and all the other things that were going on, I just really think that the Holy Spirit has this place targeted.
I agree.
Well said. Well said. Barbara.
Would you tell everybody the story you told me about the wine and the wine plants that was part of the saint that founded your work?
Sure. I'm sure everyone knows the story behind the Christian brothers, but they made their money off of wine. They moved from back east to Northern California, and a Christian brother had this vision to let's grow grapes and make some wine, and that's where it started, the winery. I'm not sure over time if you tried the Christian Brothers brandy, the label. That was their main source of revenue. And so the Christian Brothers brandy, I remember as a kid, my father buying that brandy, not understanding where it was from. I thought it was a label or a brand, but that's where it started. And so it's just amazing how one brother had this wherewithal to think about, we could actually make it into a business so we can educate more, have more schools. And that's how it started, really, with the winery in Napa, California. So.
And then my daughter was able to come up with some starts when she was weeding the grape plant that came from this property on our land.
Very unique. So Barbara was very nice and was able to cultivate some beautiful stems from her garden that she, I think, started out from St. Charles back at her home. And some of those stems made it to some donors. So it was very interesting. I still actually owe Barbara, because I do remember giving you my word that I would plant some in our new garden. So I got to figure out where to put them. So
let me just wrap up formally anyway with one last question.
Sure.
And then people can visit as long as you wish. But as we think about that phrase, let us remember we are in the holy presence of God. What's your advice to both the school and the parish in the long term of being in relationship with each other?
Well, I think the unique part is, from the school's point of view, we have a lot to gain from being with you as a parish. If you look at our school history for 20 years, well, I mean, not 20 years, the first couple of years, we were actually at a parish, but that needs some help. But for the last 15 years, we've been so isolated from that of spirituality and having a place to really worship. Our old campus served us well, but it was a building that did not have a sanctuary. So we always craved and needed a place of worship. It's very hard to have mass in an auditorium because you really want these young people who, again, a lot of them don't have the background, they don't have the experience of understanding God. You're asking them to walk into a space and let's worship. But they're like, wait a minute, let's worship, but this is a theater, right? So from the school's point of view, to be able to say, let's worship in a proper space, that to me is a huge win for the school, because there, now we can really start to talk more about the presence of God. You're walking into a sanctuary, young people, and you're now in the presence of God. So they can see it visually for themselves, right? Whereas our old campus, we never had that. No matter how we dressed it up, it was not going to be a parish, right? And so now having this space, to me, is really important. In terms of St. Charles with us, I think the welcoming part, you've done an awesome job with that. And so any creative way where you think we can invite our young people to be part of you and for us to encourage it is a win-win for us. Some of these kids will say, well, I don't know what it's like to go into a sanctuary because I've never done it before. But I think having that, just the extension of an invitation is a really important step that a lot of these kids will never experience. If they went to a local public school, they would not have that invitation. Here, that's going to happen. And that's what I'm asking St. Charles to do, right?
It's here for you, for them. Just a couple of days ago, a young woman came in and asked, can I go in the church? Just to be quiet for a while. And so she was here for a few minutes and then left. We introduced ourselves. And so, yeah, we're here for you. And Oscar, thank you for being here for us today. Really appreciate your time.
The honor, again, thank you.
Thank you all for coming. I'll close out the recording now and visit as long as you wish.
Okay, I mean,